Good afternoon, everyone, and as usual, good morning or good evening for those coming from other time zones. Thank you for joining us. My name is Raquel Miguel. I'm a senior researcher at EU DisinfoLab, and I will be moderating this webinar titled Melodies of Malice, Understanding How AI Fuels the Creation and Spread of Extremist Music and Disinformation as well. As you may know, we are a non-profit organization gathering knowledge and expertise on disinformation in Europe, and we regularly host webinars in order to give voice to experts in the field and to show the excellent work that is being done by many on different topics that cover research, policy, and responses to disinformation. As part of this initiative, we aim to make the knowledge shared in our webinars accessible to the widest audience possible, and I have an exciting announcement to share today. As of now, our webinars will feature a new tool that allows attendees to subtitle the conversation in their preferred language. How does it work? It's very simple. As shown on the screen, go to the caption section on the option marked with CC, located at the bottom right. Click on the tab, enable the translation option, and select your desired language. Please be aware that artificial intelligence is involved in this transcription and translation process, and that the subtitles won't always be perfect. We will be happy to get your feedback on this in the post-webinar survey. Don't wait and give it a try now. And before delving into the topic and introducing our guest speaker, let me mention a few housekeeping rules that may already sound familiar to many of you. First, for communication purposes and for the Q&A session, we will use Slido. You can open the app on your phone by scanning the QR code you are going to see right now on the screen, or type slido.com in your web browser, and when requested, add the hashtag disinfo. Please don't use the chat on Zoom because your questions can be overlooked. Let's get some audience interaction by inviting you to answer 2 questions. As usual, please tell us where are you joining us from today and which sector you represent. Quick reminder for the latecomers, slido.com hashtag disinfo. I'll give you a minute, and in the meantime, let me remind you this session is being recorded and the playback will be available shortly on our YouTube channel together with our previous webinars. Okay, we have people coming from Brussels, a big representation from Brussels, Germany, Vilnius, London, Stuttgart, Germany, Kiev, Ukraine, UK, Prague, Madrid, so mostly from Europe, but also we have our friends from Singapore joining us today. And regarding the sectors you represent, let's have a look as well. As you know, we cover plenty of topics, so we invite the speakers from different backgrounds, and also we expect that our audience come from different backgrounds and locations. Okay, the majority coming from non-government organizations, but also people from academia and not really, business as well. Okay, and also some regulators. That's good. Another reminder, please don't wait until the end to submit your questions. You can send them whenever you like during the presentation, and we will do our best to address them all during the Q&A session. Okay, once the scene has been set, it's time to introduce the topic and give the floor to our speaker. Our topic today focuses on research on artificial intelligence. EU DisinfoLab has been looking at the intersections on this technology with disinformation. We have published several papers on the matter. Let me recommend you the most recent one, released last week, comparing the misinformation policies of different generative AI platforms for their chatbots. And for those who aren't in the know, we have set up an AI hub where we compile and update regularly the last news and resources on the matter as well. But our speaker today brings us a different proposal and even brings us music, if I am right. I am pleased to introduce Heron Lopes. He is a research assistant at Leiden University's Institute of Political Science and the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, where he conducts OSINT research on political violence and insurgency in Southern Africa and Latin America. He has also worked for the current and emerging threats program of the International Center for Counterterrorism, where he focused on the nexus between artificial intelligence and terrorism. And he holds a master's degree in political science from Leiden University in the Netherlands. Heron Lopes will present and discuss with us today the paper Melodies of Malice, published recently by the Global Network on Extremism and Technology. A work that offers fresh insights into how extremist users meet and build communities to create and disseminate hateful music using AI. The paper also provides a new perspective on insufficient safeguards set by AI platforms, and of course, policy recommendations for tech companies and policymakers. And without further delay, let's invite Heron to speak. Thank you, Heron, for accepting our invitation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Raquel, for the lovely introduction and for the invite, and to everyone who's here today taking the time to join us in this discussion and this webinar. I am delighted to be joining the webinar series of the EU DisinfoLab and to discuss my paper published by GNet on artificial intelligence music propaganda. So let me share my slides. And Raquel already touched on it, but I just wanted to quickly introduce the global network on extremism and technology, which is the platform in which I publish my paper. The global network on extremism and technology, GNet, is an academic research initiative backed by the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, an independent but industry-funded initiative for better understanding and counteracting terrorist use of technology. GNet is convened and led by the International Center for the Study of Radicalization, ICSR, a globally renowned academic research center based within the Department of War Studies at King's College London. The initiative is supported by partners based in North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, North Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, and South Asia. If you want to know more about their works and research that they have published, you can either go to the website at the bottom of the slide or scan the QR code at the top, and I'll give you 2 seconds to do that if you're interested. Okay, so setting the agenda today, I'll be discussing the misuse of generative AI platforms to generate music-based disinformation and propaganda, and impacts of this through real case studies. And finally, I'll wrap up with policy recommendations specifically on how to make generative AI platforms more resilient to this abuse that we're going to be discussing today. So just to set the scene, I'd like to discuss how I first entered the research topic of generative AI music, extremism, and disinformation. The first article I came across on it was an article by The Guardian last summer after the Southport knife attacks. And in this article, a journalist from The Guardian discussed how TikTok bots and AI powered a resurgence in UK far-right violence. And they particularly focused on a Facebook far-right group in which music-based propaganda from a platform called Suno AI were shared and possibly linked to the far-right violence. The musics contained misinformation, disinformation about Islamist communities in the UK, but it also called on violence and social movements, which later coincide with the posting of these songs. But also, another thing that brought me into this topic is a report in which I co-authored while working at the International Center for Counterterrorism. I co-authored it with Barbara Molas, then a colleague of mine. Now she works for RAND as a senior researcher in their defense and security team. And in that report, we were trying to understand how the online far right was utilizing AI, specifically jailbreaking it. And when I say jailbreaking, I mean bypassing safety features that tech platforms put in order to prevent it from generating harmful content. And then we also tied it to policy recommendations in terms of how to counter these strategies. What I noticed while doing the collection of the data for this report, which was a manual scraping of 4 different social media platforms, is that I again came across a lot of audio-based propaganda generated by artificial intelligence. And I could not find any kind of research on the internet about this phenomenon. So I really wanted to understand the extent of it and in what kinds of ways it can impact the landscape of disinformation and extremism. And if you want to access the report, you can also scan that QR code. It's mostly focused on jailbreaking, but it gives interesting insights in this domain of exploitation of AI. All right, so for the Melodies of Malice report published by GNet, I was trying to understand how generative AI music platforms could be misused by ill-intended actors to generate propaganda and potentially radicalize and reinforce extremist ideologies and advance disinformation. I decided to do a data collection from 4chan, politically incorrect board. For those of you who are not familiar with 4chan, that is an anonymous board forum. It's a fringe platform, minimally moderated, specifically the politically incorrect part of it, which means that you can pretty much post any kind of conspiracy content, hateful content, things that would otherwise be monitored and moderated by more mainstream platforms. And this platform was created in 2003, 4chan. And since many conspiracy theories have bred from there and made it into the mainstream political debates. For instance, QAnon and the bug-eating conspiracy theory that also came to political debates recently. By manually scraping 4chan, and what I mean by manually scraping is going directly to the websites, taking a look at the data that I find relevant and downloading it, I was able to collect thousands of different data entries that informed the report Melodies of Malice. These included images, text, conversations shared among extremist users, as well as music files. I use English language for searching and manually scraping through key search terms, though any data retrieved in foreign languages was also collected and analyzed through deep AI and Google Translate. For this webinar, given I want to give a focus on disinformation strategies, I conducted a second data collection, this time on Telegram, YouTube, and TikTok, to assess how 4chan's contents, specifically audio-based content, moves from fringe platforms onto mainstream platforms. All right, so generative AI music platforms are relatively new. The first one, Suno AI, which is the most widely used on 4chan, was launched in December 2023, and Udio came later in March 2024. These are the leading generative AI music platforms, and much like ChatGPT, it enables fast, high-quality music generation with minimal effort. So if you have used ChatGPT, you're able probably to use Suno AI. You just give a prompt to the chatbot, and it will give you what you want. You can always adjust and refine everything until you get to the point where you are satisfied. This type of platform generates lyrics, melodies, instrumentation, and vocals in over 50 languages. which is something that was also observed in 4chan. There were people from all over the world generating propaganda with Suno AI. And like any new technology, emerging technology, it has the risk of potential misuse by malicious actors. And that is not to be alarmistic and say that generative AI platforms are deleterious and bad, but that currently there are ways in which we can improve them and make them more resilient to extremism and disinformation. And we can fill that gap and make them more resilient by conducting this kind of research, which collects data and evidence to understand how extremists are actively exploiting the platforms. So before moving on to findings, I wanted to show you the power of Suno AI. Today I generated a song. It took me 1 minute and 45 seconds. I timed it. And let me play 40 seconds of it. I tried to give a little bit of a conspiracy theory of how this webinar is going to control your minds. I hope you can hear it. They say you'll learn how AI spreads the hate, but open your eyes, it's all just a bait. This isn't a warning, it's part of the game. Through this very song, they'll rewire your brain. All right, so that gives you a little bit of insight. It was my first time using the platform to generate a song. It took me 1 minute and 45 seconds, and this is what I was able to get. It goes on for 3 minutes, so it's pretty easy to use in terms of creating disinformation and conspiracy theories. And one thing I noticed is you can see here at the top left, they have this new Remai beta version, which they claim to be the most creative model, but they do give a warning that it may generate content that some might find offensive. So it seems like Suno is aware that this platform is generating at times harmful content. So how are ill-intended users or extremists misusing this powerful platform to generate disinformation and propaganda? On 4chan's politically incorrect board, since the release of Suno's AI in 2023, AI music threads appeared on the board, and they became a hub for extremists and ideologically aligned users to misuse platforms for propaganda. Threads often follow specific themes such as anti-Semitic, racist, and sometimes related to real-world events such as elections of the US and so forth. But they can also promote a more general approach to extremist propaganda, as I'll show in the next slide. Songs feature memes, violence, terrorist anthems such as nasheeds, and conspiracy-related dis and misinformation that were available in various languages. Here is an example of an anti-Semitic thread, and I decided to only share a user posting the songs that he created because the thread itself gives very explicit instructions on how to create propaganda and videos. So I don't want to amplify that kind of content on here, but you can get a little bit of the gist and how users operate based on the titles of the songs. They share links and then they ask for feedbacks. And this one is a more general AI music thread, which asks for any kind of extremist and disinforming music propaganda. And as you can see here on the top right corner, there were 138 replies, many of songs or asking for tips and so forth. And these are recurring threads. I saw one that was posted today, and they have been ongoing for about 2 years now since Suno was released. So threads serve as a knowledge sharing hub, providing manuals and tutorials on how to leverage the different AI music platforms for disinformation and extremist conspirational narratives. And what I mean by that is that the tutorials not only teach you how to use Suno AI, but they also teach you how to use ChatGPT to generate lyrics or DALL-E to generate a photo for the album and other AI platforms to generate videos. if you were to upload it onto YouTube. So they share the AI-generated songs, they exchange feedbacks, and through collaboration, they're able to refine it and enhance its propaganda effect. So the end result is incredibly high quality. If you saw what I'm able to do in 1 minute and 30 seconds, you can imagine what 4chan is able to do over the period of 2 years with recurring threads and tutorials. So this fosters a collaborative environment where users discuss best practices for misusing AI tools and bypassing content moderation. They continuously refine AI-generated propaganda and reach the highest quality. And here is an example of a user asking for feedback on an AI-generated song. And this is how the thing goes. You get some feedback and you change the lyrics, and that way you get pretty good content at the end. But what exactly are they trying to achieve with that? Are they just trolls and having fun? Is something that I try to identify through the data. And these are largely decentralized and unorganized community, meaning that they don't have any leaders and they don't have any hierarchy. Yet they are collectively focused on generating propaganda and hate through AI platforms. As one user states, and many other platforms, threads do too, the goal is to make songs, make videos for them, and upload them to YouTube, upload them to Spotify, and so forth. This entails in moving away from a fringe platform, which is 4chan, where those users are already present and used to this kind of radicalizing content, and moving to mainstream platforms where you have more users, youth, and people that have never been exposed to this kind of content. And also it has the elements of algorithms that can further boost this content and make them mainstream. While not all users are ideological extremists, and some may be trolls, as I already pointed, this raises some questions about the intent and impact of their content, which is a question that I pose to you to reflect is, does the intent really matter when they're able to exploit and successfully generate harmful content and spread it to other platforms? So here is a case study of a conspiracy theory song. You might have heard of the Springfield conspiracy theory. It originated in Springfield, Ohio, the United States, and it claimed that Haitian immigrants were eating the pets, cats and dogs of neighbors. It was later even reinforced by Trump, but now it has been debunked, and the person who first created this theory is now facing a 1-year jail for actually animal cruelty, and this originated on Facebook. But then on a 4chan music threads, this user right here on the left generated a song about this conspiracy theory. And later, the same song moved on to YouTube with over 100,000 views and thousands of likes and comments. Also, I was able to find and backtrace that content to TikTok, which shows that while the users may be trolls, perhaps, or may have real intention, regardless, they're able to generate harmful content and bring it to such a wide audience. I was able to also find a far-right Telegram group with thousands of music files. You can see here at the top 3,717 music files, of which not all were generated by AI, but a significant amount came from 4chan and was generated by Suno AI. So this generation of harmful content and disinforming content is further augmented by what I conceptualize as a strategic algorithm amplification. And what I mean by that is algorithm amplification is when platforms unintentionally boost a specific content, and there's a lot of research on this for Facebook and other platforms that have artificially boosted radical and far-right content unintendedly. Strategic, on the other hand, is when users try to have that same effect with their propaganda by following some strategies. And 4chan users discuss openly strategies to artificially boost content, including the use of bots to generate engagement, interacting with their own content, liking, commenting, and reposting, using hashtags to strategically bring it to trends, but also generating far-right content and putting far-left hashtags so that far-left people would be exposed to it and possibly comments disapproval, but by commenting, they would automatically boost that content by engaging with it. These are some of the strategies that I've observed. And a recent study by the University of Southern California found that far-right accounts on X and Telegram were using similar tactics, showing that this is a broader trend and not an isolated case. And in this study specifically, far-right accounts were interacting with each other's content, and they were able to artificially boost and bring their content to a wider audience and potentially radicalize them into these ideologies. And here is an example of many others that I came across of users celebrating on 4chan when they identified that their propaganda was spreading across the internet. And here I quote, this user says, "It is being used all over the place now in propaganda. You can tell, great success. Thank you 4chan for helping to test the tech the last 2 years, ElevenLabs, Suno, etc." So he's not only praising the fact that the propaganda is spreading, but he's also praising the fact that 4chan allows them to test these platforms and enhance their capabilities in an open manner without being and getting moderated. While they're able to successfully generate harmful content, there are terms of services and all the platforms that they're using that regulate harmful content. Suno AI specifically bans content that is harmful, violent, discriminatory, obscene, or illegal. It also prohibits content that violates any laws or regulation, such as local, national, and international laws. However, these terms of services are enforced by systems such as prompts can be rejected if you're trying to generate something harmful, and by upon repeated violations in trying to generate this content, it may lead you to an account ban. But actors have found ways to bypass these features quite easily. And that is what I call jailbreaking. For music propaganda specifically, the two most important types of jailbreaking are phonetic and coded jailbreaking. And here at the bottom, you can see a screenshot of a song that I got from 4chan that uses both of them. Phonetic uses different combinations of letter that sounds like racial slurs, but are not spelled like racial slurs. And so automated mechanisms which are used in these platforms are not able to detect it and prevent the song from being generated. Another strategy is the coded phonetic jailbreaking, which uses seemingly neutral terms, such as in this instance, sand-dogs, but that within extremist communities have a harmful and pejorative connotation. And in this case, sand-dogs is a pejorative term for Middle Easterns. If you want to know more about other types of jailbreaking, you can find it on the report that I published with ICCT, and the QR code is right there if you want to scan it. So we know that there are threads reoccurring and they're able to generate all this content and they're bringing it to mainstream platforms. But what are the risks of exposing people and individuals to AI-based music propaganda? A first risk is that music has long been linked to as a vehicle and gateway to radicalization and reinforcing of existing extremist ideologies. There is a really good book on that by Jonathan Pieslak on radicalism and music, and he analyzes different kinds of far-right and violent actors and how music played a central role in not only radicalizing these users, but also boosting morale and reinforcing their ideologies. So this is something that should be taken into consideration, which is when people are being exposed to this kind of music unintendedly on YouTube or Spotify, they could be potentially being introduced to extremist ideologies and misinformation and normalizing that in their minds and becoming radicalized. Another risk, which is quite novel to the issue of AI-generated music itself, is musical echo chambers of hate and disinformation. And here I have some screenshots of users that, after coming in touch with Suno AI, they started to abandon other types of music and only generating music that are ideologically aligned with their worldviews, and often these songs are charged with violence and extremism and misinformation. So this creates this echo chamber where users are more than before exposed to radicalization through music. And it's hard to tell exactly what this could entail, as it's something new. It hasn't been researched yet. But it could potentially drive people who are radicalized into violent extremism and so forth. It's something that deserves more research, but definitely an interesting finding from the report. Finally, there's also this spillover effect of ideologies and violent extremism. And here I got two examples, case studies from 4chan. One of them is from an AI thread from 4chan, but dedicated to sexual content. And you might have heard of it already, is the Taylor Swift fake and explicit images, which were going across the media, and a lot of people thought it was real and it had real impact to Taylor Swift's reputation. But a US-based institution called Graphica was able to backtrace it to 4chan AI threads. So that shows that the content being generated in these threads do have world impacts and significant ones. And on the left, the Vice article discusses a research by UCL, a research that collected 160 million memes to detect where they were coming from. And they found out that they were coming from two websites, one of them being Reddit, and the second one, 4chan's politically incorrect board. Most of these memes were charged with hate, disinformation, and were becoming mainstream and were identified all over the internet. So this shows how 4chan generated content is going across the internet. And this links into the other risk, which is the mainstreaming of extremism. And specifically conspiracy theories and disinformation. I have two cases here. The first one is QAnon. Everyone here in this webinar has probably heard of it. It's a conspiracy theory which BBC and other researchers found to have been originated on 4chan as well. And now it's very much mainstream. It has even had instances of violent attack during the Capitol events in the US. And similarly, the right article by NPR shows the bug-eating conspiracy theory, which claims that world elites were forcing people to eat bugs, and so they would control everyone. And this conspiracy theory has also become mainstream. It has been seen at Dutch political debates, Hungarians, and expressed by politicians all over the world, specifically far-right ones. And this theory too originated on 4chan and is now mainstream. So all this propaganda that is on 4chan, a fringe platform, does have the potential to become mainstream and become part of narratives, dangerous narratives that could potentially drive up polarization and disrupt social cohesion. And a quote that I like to apply to 4chan is that it's not a popular enough platform to be on the legislation and monitored, but it is popular enough to be where a lot of dangerous narratives start. And that is something that we should try to reflect on and see how we could potentially counter these risks. And that leads me into how to mitigate generative AI misuse and policy recommendations, specifically to AI platforms. The first one is to enhance automated detection mechanisms. Like we're seeing, the jailbreaking is currently being used by avoiding this automated detection. And tech platforms can enhance these mechanisms through different ways. One of them is by investing on red teaming exercises where they try to generate harmful content and see how they can bypass the safety features. And based on that, they can improve the mechanisms, but also collaborating and funding research on the exploitation of artificial intelligence, much like the report for ICT and this one, so that they can keep track of how extremists and ill-intended users are exploiting the platforms in the real world scenario, rather than just red teaming and trying it in a lab scenario. Another thing is to promote cross-platform collaboration. And that is because, as we're seeing, extremists are using many different tech platforms to advance their strategies. An example of an initiative that does cross-platform collaboration specifically at the tech level is the Global Internet Forum to Counterterrorism, which is an initiative by Facebook, Microsoft, and Twitter and YouTube, but now it has enlarged to more than 30 platforms. And they share knowledge how and what kind of difficulties they're facing in terms of violent extremism in their platforms, but also funding research to understand what the vulnerabilities are and how they can become more resilient to these problems. Finally, another policy measure that I found, and that was in the report for the International Center for Counterterrorism, but it can also be applied here, is implementing identity verification measures. And this is a contested one and needs further research, but the data collected on 4chan showed that many users were scared that generative AI platforms would at some point request credit card details or official government IDs, which would require them to identify themselves. And they were scared that this could potentially bring them to justice if they were generating criminal content. So perhaps implementing these could avoid extremists from exploiting these platforms. However, there are also implications in terms of what about authoritarian regimes where people use generative AI for good causes, and it could potentially mean that they are being monitored and so forth. And it could also infringe on human rights regulations in different countries. In terms of limitations for this study, the first one is that the report focused mainly on 4chan for data collection, mainly due to the size cap for GNet, which is 2,000 words. And so further research is needed on mainstream platforms to see the magnitude of these campaigns of disinformation and extremism through music. Another limitation is that identifying and tracking AI-generated music on social media platforms is hard. Unlike on 4chan, where you can use keywords and links to find that content. So research on how to approach this methodologically and how to do OSINT investigations to find AI-generated content on YouTube and Spotify is really important. But as you've seen in the song that I played earlier, it's really hard at this point to distinguish AI-generated songs from human-created songs. They do sound pretty similar. So there still needs to be some thoughts in how to distinguish that and identify them. Another point is that further research is needed on whether and how organized / structured extremist groups are co-opting generative AI, not only for music goals, but also generation of extremist content and disinformation in general. And this could be applied to far-right rock bands, white nationalist groups, etc. Finally, research on policy recommendations at the state and regional level to tackle AI-generated disinformation is something that would be helpful, and particularly addressing borderline content, which is the content that is awful but lawful, and due to freedom of expression, it's not really possible to moderate, but it's still hateful and radicalizing. So research on that kind of content to see how we could possibly de-amplify that is interesting. Thank you. If you have any questions in regards to the data used to inform this report, you can reach out to me via email. I decided not to share any kind of explicit image on here, but if you do need it for any kind of research purposes, I'm happy to share the database with you. And I'm happy to pass on the floor to Raquel now for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Heron, for this fantastic presentation and for showing us another dimension of the weaponization of AI for disinformation, propaganda, and extremist purposes, and for doing this live demo as well. So it's time to start the Q&A session. As a reminder, please use the QR code to join Slido, or type slido.com #disinfo. We have around 20 minutes for questions. And at this moment, we just have one question. Don't be shy, please. But maybe while people get their questions ready, allow me to highlight and to comment on something. We already know that music is a very powerful tool for engaging audiences. And we already know that music has historically been a powerful tool for extremism and has been instrumentalized on platforms. So do you think it is even a more effective means of dissemination than other formats, such as images or videos? And do you think that AI is bringing a really new dimension on this?
It's hard to tell, because when we're talking about generative AI music, especially on 4chan and other platforms, it is often together with images and videos. So it's used as a combination. So for instance, the conspiracy theory on Springfield, it had AI generated videos on pets and Haitian communities. So I don't see, there's no research as of now to say that music is more radicalizing than image. But I do think that songs are able to embed conspiracy theories and radicalized content in a deeper in the deeper level than images are able to. So you can really discuss in detail these ideologies and radicalize others, while images are a bit more difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned in your report that, that music is combined with these other elements, images and text as well. Do you have any insights about if these elements are also AI generated, or?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? It cut for a second over here.
Yes, when combined this AI generated music with other elements such as text or videos, images, etc., do you know if these other elements were as well AI generated?
Yes, this is a common discussion on 4chan. Some users prefer to write their lyrics by hand, but this often yields less desirable results, because AI is just able to generate higher quality of lyrics. But most users do opt to use ChatGPT and other AI platforms to create the entire thing. And then, of course, you can then go there and twist some stuff and adjust it. But using AI is definitely the to-go option, even because you need to rhyme for music to make it sound catchy.
Okay, now we have more and more questions, so let's go there. Pablo is asking, how do you see AI-generated extremist music evolving in the coming years? And what proactive steps should policymakers and tech companies take to address this issue? I think you already answered at least the second part of the question, but feel free to elaborate and to comment on the evolution of these techniques.
It's really hard to pinpoint and project as to what the future will be in regards to AI-generated extremist music. It's something that hasn't been researched deeply. In fact, I think my research is the first one to do it systematically. But we see now that Suno is being sued at the EU level for data problems. So we are not even sure what the path is for the platform itself. But it could be that, for example, offline organizations start to utilize AI to generate music. Though there are like problems with that, and I give the example of white nationalist groups and far-right bands that are present in Brazil and France. They really like to go to events and generate music as part of the fun. So for them, but it's hard to tell whether they would give up on that to generate it through AI. So it's just a hard question. It's hard to predict. It could be that it's going to be larger, projected and co-opted by extremists, but it could also be that it's going to continue as it is.
Good. We have another question. Are there emerging AI-driven tools or techniques that can help detect and counter extremist music more effectively?
That's a good question. No, as far as I know, there are no current AI-driven tools to do that. There are AI-driven tools to identify text-based content and moderate social medias. It's something that is even being discussed in the research for countering violent extremism. But for audio, there's no such platforms yet, and it's something that would be really helpful. Like I said at the end of one of the slides, it's something that would even help us to identify the magnitude of AI extremist music, because right now I'm not able to effectively locate it on YouTube and Spotify. But with such platform, we would be able to even see the magnitude of it.
Okay, next question. I think you already commented on this, but maybe you want to elaborate. Someone is curious about what do you think is the power of radicalization in this context of AI and music? Do you want to elaborate a bit more on this, or?
Right. AI music has the same radicalizing power as regular music, and in existing research, it has been identified by research that music serves as a way of reinforcing ideologies. So for those who are already radicalized, they continue to reinforce their ideologies by joining groups and listening to their own songs. And there are hypotheses that users could potentially be radicalized by music itself, but there is no research testing that. So it's something that needs further research, whether users can be radicalized by music alone, or if indeed it is only something that reinforces already existing extremist ideologies.
Okay, we have two questions more related with policies and capacities. First, one attendee is asking, are there any signs of Suno and similar services to limit the capabilities of their tools? Can it be stopped, or is it a quest for users the dominating factor?
That's a good question. As far as I know, there are no signs of now to limit Suno, except for music production companies that are suing them for stealing data and potentially changing the landscape of the music industry. But one thing that is important to point out is that while Suno, in their terms of services, they do explicitly prohibit harmful content, they do not have any policies on disinformation, which leads me to believe that they actually do allow their platform to generate disinformation. And so far, there is no actor or legislation trying to limit this exploitation by the platform and bringing them the responsibility for the content being generated.
Mm-hmm. This is more on the side of the companies allowing the generation of music, but we have another question on the platforms that are more on the side of the amplification of this content. Do you know if and how this kind of content is currently being moderated on mainstream platforms? Have any platforms included this in their content policies?
Right. So yes, the content is being moderated when it's really explicit and it has hateful content. So when it's not borderline, when it's explicitly violent. And I did come across a lot of YouTube AI generated videos that I could access, and later on they were removed due to policies, YouTube policies. So in that sense, it's being moderated, not because it's an AI song itself, but just because it's a harmful content. Currently, I don't think any mainstream platform is really dedicating their teams or research to addressing AI music propaganda and disinformation. It's a pretty novel topic that has not been addressed by many institutions. So that's something that definitely should be explored by these companies.
I'm talking about amplification. I'm very curious about potential offline dissemination. Is there any evidence of this type of dissemination happening offline, such as at political rallies or demonstrations? Or you have seen, you have observed this just only happening online?
So far, through my research, only online. I think the only indication that it could have an offline link of casualty would be the report that I mentioned by The Guardian, which linked the Facebook group and AI music propaganda to the waves of violence in the UK. But of course, it's really hard to establish causal lines between the two, because how do we test that someone went to the streets and committed violence because of the songs rather than other kind of content that they have been exposed to? It's something really hard to test.
I would like to ask you as well on the language and the genre of the music, because you mentioned this in your report, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more. Are there specific languages or music genres where the music of AI tools is particularly concerning?
Not necessarily. Suno just gives you really the platform to generate songs in over 50 languages, and any kind of musical style. What is particularly concerning about that is that you can easily get highly radicalizing lyrics through ChatGPT and generate, for example, 10 songs with different musical styles. So if I like rock and you like pop music, then it's easier to reach different audiences very easily. So I think that's the only variable right there that would play into the musical style. And of course, the language is, you could potentially do foreign interventions. So let's say Russia wants to spread disinformation in a small country in Africa with a specific language. If that language is supported by Suno AI, then that would easily enable these actors to spread disinformation at the international level, which would otherwise be really hard because you need someone to speak that language and do the songs and so on.
Thank you, Heron. We have two more questions in the queue. I think you already commented on this, but I will just read them again in case you want to add something. How effective have tech companies been in identifying and removing AI-generated extremist content, and where do gaps remain?
It's a controversial topic, especially given the current context of tech companies bringing back community notes and changing their moderation policies at the US level and the coming legislations within the European Union. I think at the moment, mainstream platforms have not addressed and moderated and removed AI-generated extremist content at a sufficient level. It needs improvement. I can still see a lot of it on my TikTok after interacting with the algorithm is something that I can easily find. So it does need substantial improvements in that sense to remove and take down violent extremist and disinformation content. But that depends on the geographical location, of course.
And the last one, what do you think about using LLMs to detect and identify extremist and conspiracy messages, lyrics, songs? Is there any project in that way?
Not aware of any project that uses this. I know there is a piece by the Global Network on, well, GNet by Clarissa Nelu, and it explores how AI can be harnessed for PCV efforts. And in that insight, she discusses a platform that is being used or potentially can be used to detect and identify extremist and conspiracy messages. And of course, this ties back into investing on research to understand the coded languages and phonetic and kind of words that these actors are using, and then feed it into the automated mechanisms to take it down. Otherwise, users are going to find a way to advance their capabilities and keep the content online.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Heron, we are running out of time, but you did a great job by addressing all the questions in the queue. If there is no more, I just would like to say thank you again for these exciting discussions that highlighted how AI can be weaponized for malicious purposes. I hope our audience has enjoyed and learned a lot, which is something we would love to hear about. That's why you will be kindly requested to fill in a rating survey at the end of the webinar. And please let us know as well about your experience with the subtitles. Did you find them useful? Did they work well? You can also suggest topics to be covered in our next sessions. And before wrapping up, let me announce our upcoming webinars. Next Thursday, we will have Marina Sacristan from Fundación Maldita presenting their fantastic research on the role of fact-checkers in X community nodes. And on the 27th of March, we will have Clickbait Cures, how Meta and Google failed to stop fake medical ads with Alexandra Atasanova from Reset Tech. We hope to keep seeing you around. And also a quick reminder that the recording of this webinar will be available shortly on our YouTube channel. And in case you are wondering, our call for proposals for our annual conference to be held in Ljubljana in October has been a big success. We have received more than 200 proposals, and we are currently in the work for selecting the most valuable ones. So the program is taking shape, and expect more information coming soon. And stay tuned because the registration will open soon as well. Thank you again, Heron. Thank you, Maria, our support behind the scenes. And thanks to everyone who attended. Have a fantastic rest of the day and see you very soon.